These law books now are just completely blatantly clear, right? This is the law of parliamentary elections and election petitions. This is a 1909 book. This is even actually before the 1948 and 1949 Act that actually put the legal focus on the person themselves, right? Actually, the person themselves being presented. This is when it was just entertainment, but this still renders what GB News are doing illegal, because when it's given to the electors for free, it's to do with YouTube and Freeview. So these are actual legal cases. This is a proper book of law that cites actual real cases that existed and the outcomes of them and opinions of judges. And it's not just like a book that a random person's wrote. This is like a proper law book, right, with citations of cases, right? It says here, this is in respect of like the law of treating in elections, right? It says, no one who has heard the history of the Garden Party can doubt for a moment that it was corrupt treating. It was held for the purpose of affecting the elector and not just affecting the elector, but and as a means of gaining popularity for the candidate. So this is about gaining popularity for candidates, right? It was entirely managed by Mr. M, who sent out all the invitations and invited persons who were not in any sense Lady C's friends. So you might say, well, this is like, some private people who had a party and invited people, right? But GB News is it's privately funded, and it's entertainment with a purpose to entertain, and it's provided for free to the electors. And that is all it needs, right? As a means to gain popularity for the candidates, which it did, and that's how Farage got elected and Tice. That's exactly what they did. Here, another one, right? As to this is the different case study, right? As to this, Channel J said, the charge of treating at the town hall is a serious one and a difficult question to decide. Now, one object of that meeting was to enable Sir JC to see his friends, right? But it was also to get, for the respondent, the benefit of Sir J's popularity. So that's like two motives together. They're saying that, yes, okay, it was there to enable this man to see his friends, right? But then there was a second motive that was gaining benefit of popularity. So for GB News, they are providing news and entertainment, but by having these MPs and candidates as presenters, permanent, it's to the benefit of their popularity. Now, the thing is that, and also it's the frequency of it. They're on regular now. When it was just random acts or random things, it was less tenable, but they're actually on there on a permanent regular show. So it makes it completely and blatantly obvious that it's for popularity. And this is another case citation here. It comes within what I have mentioned before, expenses, for the purpose of getting personal popularity. Illegal if corrupt. Therefore, one has to consider whether or not that amounted to corrupt treating. Well, if it's for the purpose of gaining popularity, it is under these acts, right? For the purpose of getting popularity. When any expenses which are not paid for by the agent through the spending and the campaign fund, anything which is not accounted for in that spending, which is for the purpose of getting popularity, is an illegal and corrupt practice. And that is just what it is. And there's 17 pages out of that book. I already have read one of the Corrupt and Illegal Practices books. That one's really, the other book's good for the procedures for the election petition, but these are actually case studies where it's just laid out here. This is actually what it is. This is exactly on topic to what it is. So I don't know if we're going to be able to get the police to do anything or not, because I just think that they're kind of in on it. And they're like, okay, yeah, we're going to go along with this cheating, Nigel Farage and reform. The Tories, they're going to change the nation and the country, and we're just going to let them do it, even though it's illegal, right? Why don't they change the law first? But they're not changing the law, because if they remove that law, then you could just get Donald Trump or someone else who's got loads of money. They don't have to have any control on the spending. So therefore, whoever's got the most money can get the most popularity. And then independent candidates really won't actually have a chance. It won't be a fair competition then, because it's actually who's got the most money, not who the electors themselves really want or know about, because they won't know about certain other people, or they won't have a fair chance. Jacob Rees-Mogg in the High Court, he had an argument like, oh, it's freedom of expression under EU law, but it's like, is this an European Union election? The backstabbing of Rees-Mogg, the irony of Rees-Mogg, is that he's all for this, Britain, Reform UK and GB News are all like, they've got the Union Jack, they're all about Britain, Nigel Farage is all about leaving Europe, and then Rees-Mogg comes along. And he's like, I'm using the European law, freedom of expression. What? Like in some Swedish or Finnish test case, right? Oh, is this a Finnish or Swedish election? Or is it a British one, right? It's actually an insult to Farage and even GB News having the flag when Rees-Mogg is like using all this European Union freedom of expression law, right? When it's a British election under British law, under a British competition. The freedom of the Human Rights Act and EU law, the right to a fair contest, the right to a fair competition, the right for everyone in a race to have, a fair or equal chance, which is why they've got the spending limits, right, and accounting laws, right? And Rees-Mogg completely breaks it. Mogg is, and then he's driving around in this chauffeur-driven car when he's, in France, his little. Mogg is a disgrace to GB News. I cannot believe that Mogg had I can't believe the balls that he's got to go on illegally in the first place, right? He's completely Dutch courage. And then he's on GB News with all these Union Jack logos, right? And we're going to make Britain better. And Farage is like, you want to leave the EU and all this. And then Mogg goes into the High Court, right? They're not even using the Representation of the People Act. They're pretending it doesn't exist. And then he challenges Ofcom's feeble and piffy policy, which amounts to nothing. It's not the worst policy ever known to man. It's not even a law, right? With freedom of expression argument under EU article, which is about as vague as a VAR. It's about as vague as, a shapeless, structure. It's about as, it's so vague that, freedom of expression of, well, what does that mean? No one's got freedom of expression in Europe because they're not allowed to do or say anything in Germany. It doesn't exist. There is no freedom of expression because, what is Lawrence Fox doing in court if there's freedom of expression? Mogg is a double crosser, and he's all about himself and his money and income and wage from Ofcom, and as the first chance he gets, screw English law, English competitive sportsmanship and fairness, and I want my freedom of expression. Mogg thinks that he's free and has the freedom and right to cheat in competitions, basically. That's his freedom of expression. So, you might as well say, I'll have you a race, but I can, I trip you up or kick you in the balls or whatever, right? And that's a fair race. I've got the freedom freedom to express myself as I want in this race, right? So I'll push you all over, right? Or, talk about having, cheating with expenses and having facilities and resources which are not accounted for in spending to his own aid or detriment. he might as well, fill everyone's pockets up with, gold bars in the race, and then he wins because everyone's weighed down with it, rather than, it's effectively like that. Mog's freedom of expression is, fill all of the other competitors' pockets with gold bars, right? And then I'll run a race against them and I'll win, right? Because not only is he lanky, but he weighed less, right? Because their pockets were filled. Fill your boots filled with gold bars, right? This is it. Mog is a complete and total cheat, and it's people like Professor Tim Wilson who should know better, right, who are not actually calling out the true law and just going basically on this vague policy. Being a television producer and staff person, Professor Tim Wilson should know that law. He should know it, the Representation of the People Act, and he's actually encouraging corruption. It is concerted. They're all in on it. Baron Grade of Yarmouth's in on it. The Ofcom itself is in on it, because they've even got Mog's name in the drop-down menu on the complaint. So when you put the complaints menu, you're getting candidates promoted. Even Lee Anderson's in that menu and people like that. So Ofcom are in on it. I think the police are in on it. I think Starmer is, because he's standing back and he's like, okay, then we're going to crack the media now, right? We're just going to break the law. This is corrupt and illegal practices. It's orchestrated. The Culture, Media, Sport Committee are in on it. And I'm in disbelief. The only thing you can really do now is, save up £5,000 and wait until Reform stand in another election, right? And do it within 14 days. I don't think that the returning officers are going to do anything, because I think that all the Conservatives, this is their plan, right? This is like, okay, we're all going to go over to Reform once Nigel Farage has paved this corrupt way. We'll let Nigel go up there with a Dutch courage and pave the path, right, which is corrupt and illegal. And then once we've got away with it, then we'll just erase the law or remove it. But it's not that easy to do it, because it's a very well-established principle throughout the whole of English history, this provision of entertainment and treating in order to get votes. And then that's what they're doing, even without the 1949 Act. And it actually made it really clear that they're not allowed themselves. They don't even have to say anything. It's not actually what is said. It's got, Rees-Mogg has been pulled up on his comments, but you don't have to speak. You don't have to say anything, right? All you have to do is be there, right? Be visible, be seen or heard, right? And then you've got Boris Johnson with his newspaper column. So Johnson's in on it. They're all in on it. Johnson's concerting with it. They're attacking the whole. They're wanting to modernise the process, and they're wanting to say, okay, we can do this. It's not cheating, but it is, right? When it's still illegal, and apparently, this is how the government supposedly makes change. Yet, you would have thought they'd start by changing the law, but they can't really change those laws, because a new party might come along and completely wipe them out, right? What happens if, I know that these people have got the biggest sponsors that you can get on the planet, right? But if they did get rid of that law, what's to stop Elon Musk just, planting some party out of nowhere and taking them all out, in one day? They can't get rid of that law, because it will facilitate total cheating, right? And then they never know when, Jeff Bezos might double-cross them, Mog's double-crossing us. How do they know that, some foreigner or whoever might double-cross them, or, some Dragon's Den person, unless they've got the tabs on every single person who's a billionaire, just to make sure that, they're on their side. But this is the thing. It doesn't matter what side you're on, because they're all in on it. And it's sad, really, that Carla Denyer, for the Green Party, who aren't doing very well, really, they could be doing better. And the Lib Dems aren't calling them out on it, which means that either the Lib Dems and Green Party are kind of a bit dumb, and they don't really understand the law properly, and they're just being kind of sheep herded along, and they aren't really that savvy, or they're kind of in on it as well, and they're going to back it up. But I don't know why they would support it, because they're not winning. They're actually at disadvantage Although I think Carla Denier has been on some entertainment programs. I think she's been on like University Challenge type program. It's not as high profile as GB News, but it's still cheating. And so she's kind of like sort of had put a foot in the water anyway and dabbled in it. You know.